There is grandeur in this view of life.
Welcome to Evolution Talk with Rick Coast, an introduction to the oldest story ever told.
Walking on two legs marked a huge change for our species. In fact, being almost exclusively bipedal makes us unique among our primate cousins. The question is, how did our ancestors start spending so much time on two legs?
That's Professor Neil Shubin from an HHMI Biointeractive video. It's the perfect intro to what we are going to look at today. If Professor Shubin's name sounds familiar, it's because we've met him before. Way back in episode 54, The Predictive Power of Evolution. That's when we were first introduced to the fossil known as Tiktaalik. In the introduction we just heard, Professor Shubin asks the question, how? It's a really good question. How did an ancient ancestor evolve the ability to walk on two legs? Another question that's equally valuable to understanding the how is why. Why did we evolve from maybe an ancient knuckle walker to a bipedal hominin? And what purpose or evolutionary benefit did it even serve? It's easy for us to say today that, walking on two legs is better than four because that's all we know. But it wasn't always the case, not a few million years ago. And that's how far we are going to go back in this episode. To be a little more precise, we are going back
3.9 million years ago and 2.9 million years ago.
That's Dr. Lindsay Barone from a DNA Learning Center series. So why go back so far? Well, that's when Australopithecus afarensis lived in Africa. And on November 24th, 1974, the day after my birthday, as a matter of fact, a discovery in Ethiopia helped us understand the transition from quadruped to biped a little bit better.
Put one foot in front of the other.
That discovery by American paleoanthropologist Donald Johanson is known today as Lucy. An interesting aside, especially for music fans, Lucy gets her name from the Beatles song, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. Apparently it was in constant rotation at the camp when she was discovered. So, what do we know about Lucy and others like her? Well, we know the time period when she walked the earth, that was 3.2 million years ago. We also know she had a small brain, not much different in size to a chimpanzee's, and her anatomy was decidedly ape-like. She also walked on two legs with a spine and foot bones that aren't too much different than our own. But it's not only her spine and feet that clue us into the fact that Lucy walked on two legs. It's also the location of the foramen magnum. So, what is that?
Foramen magnum means basically big hole or great hole in Latin. And that's the place where your spinal cord matches up with your head.
With the foramen magnum where it is on Lucy's skull, this means it's perfectly positioned for upright walking. And had she walked primarily on all fours, the foramen magnum would be located more towards the back of the skull. So what else do we know? Well, Lucy also lived in a wide range of environments, and these would have included grasslands and forests, and her diet would have consisted of both plants and animals. She's also thought to have been a social creature who probably used simple tools. While we know quite a bit, there's even more that we don't know, but we're getting there. The question still remains, why? The why question isn't a new one, to be sure. Going back to Jean-Baptiste Lamarck in the early 19th century, we see the same questions being asked. Now, we've covered Lamarck a few times in past episodes, but for those of you unfamiliar with Lamarck and his work, he was a French naturalist who had his own theories about evolution decades before Charles Darwin dropped The Origin of Species on the world. Lamarck believed that evolution did indeed occur, but he called it transmutation, and it was the inheritance of acquired characteristics during one's lifetime that accounted for it. For example, if I continuously reach to the top shelf to grab my beer mug, Lamarck might point out that there's a very good chance my children will inherit slightly longer arms from all the stretching I've been doing. Maybe not quite the way it works. Well, Lamarck also applied this speculation to bipedalism as well. In his 1809 work, Zoological Philosophy, Lamarck suggested that four-footed animals such as apes began to use their hind legs for locomotion, and this eventually gave rise to humans who walked on 2 feet. It's this that allowed us to gain superiority, according to Lamarck, over other animals. And why bother to use hind legs to stand? Well, he would tell you to see predators coming by looking over the tall grass. Now, Darwin wasn't far behind Lamarck. In The Origin of Species, Darwin proposed that humans evolved from ape-like ancestors who once lived in the trees. As they moved to a ground-based lifestyle, adaptations allowed them to stand on 2 feet, and this freed their hands up to do other things, such as carry objects or make tools. It happened slowly and gradually over a long period of time, an immensely long period of time. In his 1871 book, The Descent of Man, Darwin doubled down.
The hands and arms could hardly have become perfect enough to have manufactured weapons, or to have hurled stones and spears with a true aim, as long as they were habitually used for locomotion.
Now, Darwin may have been onto something, but not when it came to the use of stone tools. They showed up much later than bipedalism, about 4 million years later. But either way, one can't blame Darwin or Lamarck or anyone else for getting some things wrong along the way. Even today, we're still trying to figure it all out. We have yet to find an intermediate stage between an ape-like and human-like body form. In a 2021 interview for the Boston Museum of Science, anthropologist Dr. Jeremy De Silva had this to say about where the gap in our knowledge is.
We aren't even sure the body form from which upright walking first evolved. This is a really hot topic in our field right now. Some researchers have proposed that instead of bipedalism evolving from the ground up, it happened from the top down, from an ape standing or swinging up in the trees. Now, to test these ideas, we desperately need fossils, ideally partial skeletons from 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 million years ago.
10 million. The oldest we have right now is the 9 cranial fossil specimens of Sahelanthropus chidensis, discovered in 2001 by French paleontologist Michael Brunet. Again, we're fairly certain they walked upright because of the position of the foramen magnum. It's also in an underside location that's closer to the front of the skull, which indicates that Sahelanthropus most likely walked upright on 2 legs. Now, we can only speculate, and the search continues. It may only be a matter of time. And that's if there's a fossil record to find. That's really a big if. As we've learned over the course of this show, fossils are extremely rare in the grand scheme of things, and conditions have to be just right for their preservation, especially when talking about a creature that died millions of years ago. But all we need to find is one, and sometimes that's all it takes is the fragments of one to begin to piece it all together. Aside from fossils, we do have something else that's pretty amazing. Another great piece of evidence that Australopithecus afarensis walked upright. As Dr. Barone explains it, what we have is
a set of fossilized footprints.
This set is known as the Laetoli footprints found in Tanzania.
The Laetoli footprints were basically made by at least 2 Australopithecus afarensis individuals walking through essentially a patch of wet volcanic ash.
The volcanic ash, when mixed with rain or moisture, served almost as a walkway of cement. And lucky for us, just as you see when someone walks or runs across freshly laid cement or presses their hand into it, we have a print. Under the right conditions, that print can last almost forever. In this case, these prints have lasted for 3.6 million years before being discovered in 1978.
So these individuals were walking side by side through this wet ash. Those footprints became fossilized.
Now, these prints are hard evidence of bipedalism, no pun intended, dating back to when Australopithecus walked the earth.
So there are only foot marks, and there's no hand marks in the Laetoli footprints.
Now, you have to admit, we are incredibly lucky to have what we have. From fossils to footprints, none of this had to be preserved, nor did we even have to find it. But we did. And hopefully there's a lot more out there, maybe even under our own 2 feet, to find. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Evolution Talk. I'm Rick Coast, and if you find value in the show, please consider supporting it at evolutiontalk.com. There you will also find show notes and source material for this very episode, and ways to contact me. I'd love to hear from you. I hope your week is going well, and until next time, please take care of yourself.
Evolution Talk is a Rick Coast production.